reports, the zoning board of appeals for permits. Since our last, sometimes, be there, pretty soon.
No, just update, things are starting to pick up a little bit more, not so much in the building side of things yet. But I've had a couple of inquiries about demolition, permits for demo, which my experience so far in that is that it's not, it's commented on in the ordinance, but it's more of a, I think just the information. Don't really want to stand in the way of someone that's demoing a building or something that should come down. But apparently the county charges $100 for a demo. Found this out this week from one gentleman that called me about it. And, so that was news to me. So I suggested that he has to rebuild his burned out garage. He has to demo it first, so he's got to get a demo permit from the county for $100, and he's got to pay a $300 building fee or permit for the building. So, and they told him that he needed, to clear it with the township. So, my path on that is basically to say, let's just do it in one, because we don't charge for demo permits. So we have, it's not on the fee schedule anymore. So, we're just gonna do that kind of as one. I did just put on your permit that this includes the demo of the old, per the county, and then what he wants to do next from there. Now I had another one today. They want to remove an old mobile home that is really no longer livable and all that. So again, I asked her to fill it out, just so that we have something on file, really, so that if someone in the community later has anything to say about it, say, yeah, they talked to me. We're aware of it now, and that way the county also has something to fall back on it. The other thing is, that maybe it should come up as an agenda item, but I'll just make a comment. I brought this up last fall about under land divisions. Remember on our schedule of regulations, each zoning district has a line, ag, R1, CR. Ag in the first column under lot sizes, there's a footnote. The lot size, minimum lot size in ag is 20,000 square feet, so just under a half acre. But the footnote says that density, lot density should be no more than 2 lots per 20 acres. Okay, so in other words, you could have one that's a half an acre, or you could have in a 20, and then you could have a 19 and a half. That would fall within that. That's a nice, neat little package, right? Or a 15 and a 5, or 17 and a 3, whatever. But I have one come up now this week that is like 39 acres. And when you start splitting that up, the way they wanted to split it, in more than 2 amounts, there was no way to get 2 per 20. So maybe they wanted an 8.5, an 8.5, and a 17, and a 5. Which density-wise, that would be 4 pieces, but it doesn't fit within the definition, and I talked to Ken about this, within that definition of 2 lots per 20. So, as it stands, I talked to Ken, I talked to Bob about this particular one, and if they want to go ahead with 2 17s and a 5 on this 39, we all think that is within the scope of what we want to do. But I don't know if that's something that we want to revisit. I talked to Dean Ferrier, surveyor, who's going to survey that piece for him, and he said, boy, in all my years of surveying, he said, I've never seen that in a zoning ordinance before. Now, I know when, in talking to previous people, Dave and whoever before, the purpose for that was to, I think, to follow the master plan and preserve our agricultural areas, so that you don't have a 20-acre piece that gets split up into 10 2-acre parcels on ag. I mean, that would be the end result of that. And so it's in order to keep it down. When I first started, it was, I seemed to hear, wow, no, is there a 10-acre minimum for ag? Well, when you look at it, there isn't. The minimum size is 20,000 square feet on ag. But there's that stipulation, you can't have a whole bunch of half-acre ones. You can have that and another one if you're splitting it up. So, based on the number of splits that someone might have, and if you haven't split your property in 30 years, that whole split, that kind of reset. I'm a little bit cloudy on it going forward. If this comes up again, I think we've got this hurdle jumped in this particular case. But with property values being what they are, it's gonna come up more. And, maybe we need to look at that at the planning commission level, on that verbiage, and decide in order to meet, again, stick with the master plan. What we want to do, is there another way to word it or to look at it? While being within the Land Division Act, you know, we can't supersede that in the state. But I'm no attorney, and now that we are getting a new representation, we don't even have somebody to talk to yet, so. So I'll leave it at that for now. But I think it's something that we should have maybe on the agenda coming up, just to talk some more about it. Maybe Ken can snoop around a little bit, see how other townships are handling that when they're trying to maintain their agricultural feel, and yet dealing with a parcel of property. So that's all.
Okay, makes sense, because I think it has come up every now and then. Okay, so township board, Christie's not here today, so there's the minutes. That part, Ken, do you have anything to?
Just the February planning report was in the packet, and then I passed out the March one at everyone's places. So if anyone has any questions, let me know.
All right. So we are now to some unfinished business. We have discussions of the zoning ordinance, so the transfer extraction. I'm going to start with A and move our way on down.
If I could, I mean, it's been a couple months, do you want me to kind of bring everyone back to where we're at this point with this ordinance? So this is an amendment that the transitory extraction PUD ordinance was adopted last year by the board. So this would be an amendment to that existing ordinance. And how it came about was the township board, again, last year thought changes need to be made to clarify that these requirements only apply to large scale extraction operations. Somebody wants to dig a basement or dig a pool or something smaller scale, these requirements aren't gonna apply to that type of work. So the ordinance, in the packet, you had a clean version and a red line version. So if you look at the red line version, the changes at the bottom of page 1 over into page 2, that was added to address that, to make it clear that, you know, the larger scale PUD requirements don't apply to smaller scale projects. When this was sent to the township attorney, they suggested additional changes based on their review, and those are the other changes included in there. So if you skip ahead to page 13, again, looking at the red line version, the township attorney, or the former township attorneys, I guess, had suggested adding subsection, well, actually page 6 and page 7. Sorry, page 12 and page 13. On page 12, new subsection 6, specific requirements for pit operations, that comes from the police power ordinance. So Peter Wendling thought that should really be in the zoning ordinance. So they suggested pulling that over. And then on page 13, subsection 7, specific requirements for stripping operations, same thing. That was in the police power ordinance. Peter said that should really be in the zoning ordinance. And then on page 16, subsection G, same thing, the language relating to reclamation plans was in the police power ordinance, and Peter thought that ought to be in the zoning ordinance. So those are the changes that were the amendment to the existing ordinance. And the planning commission held a public hearing in January, postponed a decision. So procedurally, the planning commission, needs to either further postpone a decision or make a recommendation to approve the amendments. That will then next go to the county planning commission, and if they have 30 days to comment, and then it will ultimately go to the township board, or make a recommendation to deny the amendments. The same process, the denial recommendation will go to the county planning commission, they have 30 days to comment, and then it will ultimately go to the board. So, anyone has any questions for me, let me know.
I just have a question I can answer about the police power ordinance. Should that verbiage go into his zoning ordinance? What happens to these residents?
That will have to be amended as well. If these changes were approved, that ordinance will have to be amended to essentially delete all these sections. But because that's not part of the zoning ordinance, that's not something the planning commission will involved with. That'll be strictly with the board. So when and if this makes its way to the township board, at the meeting when they consider amending the zoning ordinance, they should also be considering amending the police power ordinance to essentially remove all these items.
I can kind of kick off a little bit of a conversation. I did get an email from Richard. So I would share if I actually brought it with me. If not, I'll share it next time. But he did share with us another ordinance. We guys have that in the packet, right? A simplified ordinance. So his thoughts here. Perhaps, maybe before I read this, I'll kind of go back to what you were saying too, right? I mean, I think that we have, maybe there's a little bit of two different conversations happening. I think we have the conversation about amending an ordinance, as requested by the township board. I mean, this is the ordinance, and that's just adding the police power verbiage and, adding that bit about making sure that it's not impacting residential type projects. And then I feel like there's another conversation that has been brought up a little bit about reviewing it in its entirety because it's very complex. So I don't know if we want to talk about the two differences there, but I think before we keep going, I think it might help us determine what direction we're going, right? Like, do we feel like, what are your thoughts about, the current language, the amendment that we have done for the township board versus the need for us to sort of look at this a little bit, which is, doing a lot of work that was already done, there was reasons that it was done. I think that's part of something for us to think about as well, and why it was done. So our current ordinance prior to this one, was not, you can help me out here too, but we were, not up to date with the Michigan Zoning Act, correct? And so to get in line with that, kind of where this all started. And so part of that, we talked about, I think, a little bit looking at more of the consequences to the public should something happen, right? And there's a lot of legalese in here, and it is rather confusing to read, but I do think some of the intent of that is to just give some basis and some explanation as to why some of these things are there. So, what are your guys' thoughts, I guess?
Well, this was already adopted,
It is.
so to scrap it all and start over, is that, is that what you're suggesting?
I wonder if, so here's the email from Mr. Christie. A little bit of what we kind of talked about in our last meeting too, right? concerns about the complicated litigation case. He believes it to be far too complicated and burdensome both for any applicant as well as for the township administrator. I believe that many other residents would agree with me. In fact, they have expressed that sentiment in public comments at multiple board meetings. I disagree with a former board member who repeatedly stated that in today's complex society, we need an ordinance that requires attorney interpretation. That just doesn't make sense, especially in an environment where we want to promote government efficiency. We need less government regulation, not more. Our township has spent almost more money on developing the new government ordinance than it should have. And I think the cost will climb if we don't head this in the opposite direction. But then it kind of goes on to talk about zoning, but I do not support eliminating zoning in our township. If we can keep it reasonable, I'm not sure that that's really pertains to what we're talking about here. And then less than 4-page ordinance that he distributed is a good example of an effective and reasonable groundwork for peace. Just suggesting that we, Banks Township Planning Commission recommendation of replacing the recently approved ordinance with a version. Kind of writing for my
I didn't get it in my packet.
No, this was just an email that he had shared with me and said I would share it on his behalf.
Okay, so.
There was in the packet, the one that, there was an alternative ordinance, and it's actually on the agenda.
The second.
That was, I think, prepared by this person. And procedurally, again, what's before the, we had a public hearing on it, and it was to amend the zoning ordinance specifically in the way that appears in the red line version. So I guess if the planning commission were inclined to, kind of dig back into the whole thing, the suggestion would be to make a denial recommendation on that amendment, and maybe within that say, we'd also like to, reconsider the whole ordinance. And that would be close out the topic of that public hearing, and that was not a total rewrite, it was just an amendment at this point.
I am not the newbie to this, well, I mean, all of this, of course, is new to me, I'm not the new member on this, so I would ask the new members if you had, new member, I guess I would spotlight any, have you had a chance to read through this?
I have.
Okay. Excuse me, Frank was better.
I don't know if it's, and this is just my thinking, I don't know if it's worth opening up the entire can of worms to go back after all the time and effort that's been put into it. Obviously, I have not been here long enough. In comparison to everyone here, I don't want to come in and shake up the globe, for lack of a better term, of putting it in terms of everything that's been done up until this point. I know it's been a topic of conversation within the township for a substantial amount of time, especially talking to other attorneys for other townships and seeing what their perspectives are and listening to what they kind of look at it from the outside looking in. I am more confident within what's there in terms of how it's wrote, the verbiage, and kind of understanding it a little bit more and the complexities of it. That's kind of where I'm at in comparison to all of us on that.
This was thrown at you quite quickly, so I appreciate that you tried to get up to speed here. Anita, personally, I would be, the way I would lean is to adopt this red letter version of this and move forward as based on the fact that it has stood up in court, the Kaiser versus Kason, it's a tried and true bulletproof litigiously. I think it does protect the health, safety, and welfare of our residents. It's thinks about things that we aren't able to think about in terms of, like reclamation and, in terms of like just the simple fact of like you dig down 1 feet and like the slopes that go to the water, so it protects our water, you dig down, you have 3 feet of slope, all these things that I think are strong protections of, our natural resources. And I don't see anything in here too onerous for someone who wants to do a stripping operation or a mining operation that, up front, the person who wants to apply for this has to have a really good planner, a really good site planner. And if they do that, then the community benefits, they're protected, and I just think all of these things have already been so well thought through. I guess I would recommend moving forward with the amended version. Some things in here may seem like overkill, like the height of a stockpile, being so high to, but if you haven't done much traveling and seen development in other areas, things like that matter, like a wind on a day where there's a lot of wind and the stockpile is way beyond your neighbor's property, you aren't gonna be able to sit in your backyard and enjoy your family or whatever, enjoy your yard even. So that may seem like overkill, but I see rationale for it. To have it 150 feet away from all streets and other property lines. It addresses noise, vibration, dust, hours of operation. I just think it's very thorough. And I think anyone that endeavors to do this kind of operations, they're gonna have legal representation. They just are. They're gonna have someone looking out for their, protecting their interests in this. So to say that we should just keep it so simple that you don't take into consideration all of these nuances, that's not the day and age we live in, I don't think. So that would be my position.
I just wanted to briefly follow up on this, the chair said, so the township attorney, I guess former township attorney, the state law, the Planning and Enabling Act requires the township to determine that a soil extraction operation is not going to create very serious consequences. And the former ordinance didn't do that. And so the former provisions in the zoning ordinance have been repealed and replaced by this new section, which, as the chair said, the township attorney worked on, and this is the formula or the ordinance that has been tested at the court level and has been upheld. And basically the purpose of all this is to determine that the operation does not create very serious consequences for surrounding properties. So, and ultimately it's up to the township board. The planning commission just makes a recommendation. Township board is the adopts or denies the amendment that's kind of on the table.
Any other thoughts?
They both nailed it. I think the way it's written now, we don't need to destroy the whole thing.
Right, I mean, I agree with you guys as well. I think it's a lot, but I think it shouldn't be a lot because it could be severe consequences. I don't think the intent is to prevent it. The intent is just to make sure that, somebody doesn't that was bounded on them. Hey, that is not impacted. Certain amount of water and everything else. So, all right, so the final right verbiage.
Yeah, if the planning commission's inclined, it would be a motion to recommend to the township board approval of the amendment to the transitory extraction of natural resources ordinance, Article 11 of the zoning ordinance.
Well, I would make that motion.
I'll support.
Okay, so all in favor,
I,
or same sign. And so the motion to send it to the
Make the recommendation to approve the amendment.
and
Yep, so the next step is I will tomorrow send this over to the county planning commission. We'll have 30 days to review it. And then at the close of that, or if they get back to us sooner, which they usually do, then we'll send it up to the township board.
the second topic was the alternate standards, our ordinance. I think we kind of talked about them all together, so. Move to, the 2024 Draft Planning Commission Annual Report. Guys, had a look at that. I think it looked good, Ken.
There were some blank spaces.
Yeah.
I'm just looking, and those can be taken out, or, I'm just looking for, this is the format that the planning commission has previously used. It includes all the information that's required by the Planning Enabling Act. The blank spaces are, I'm just looking for some feedback from the planning commission.
I did have on the bulletin point number 1 and 2, just a clarification, it does say it refers to Emmett County Planning Commission. I think that was an error. I'm sure you meant Banks Township Planning Commission.
Yes, I did. What
Okay,
page was,
yeah.
where's that at?
So that would be page 4. Page 4 where the blank spaces are.
Okay.
Other than that, I think it looks good.
I'm not sure if we had it on there in the past or maybe we want to.
Yeah, I don't see
now.
that, so I'm.
Oh, sorry, moving on. Did you find the comment from
Oh, I did not find it.
Okay, page 4 of the discussion draft, under bullet point number 1 of bulletin point number 2 is the Emmett County.
Okay, so it should be, actually, that should be Antrim County. Thank you for touching that.
So then moving to the planning commission priorities and work list 2025. Did we have on there before, perhaps it's a good idea just to continue to review the goals and objectives of the master plan, to consider improvements. That is all.
Well, I had one thing that is kind of headed into the next thing too. And we were reviewing our master plan, the demographic section, and they had a suggestion that Banks Township, and you find the direct language. The last bulletin point, so that'd be on page 14, is that Banks Township should explore, based on the fact that we have 24% of our houses, based on our demographic information, 24% of our houses were built earlier than 1939. And under the key takeaways, it says our summer population jumps up to $35,000, underscoring, or 35,000 residents, underscoring that this is a destination region. But on the last point, it says Banks Township should explore setting up a revolving housing fund to help residents perform home repairs provided by low interest loans. Yeah. Is that something that we have an appetite for? Or is that something that we would want to put on our priority thing? I just wanted to hear what y'all thought about that.
Or is that something we even have?
Yeah, I mean, that would be,
I've never heard of such a thing, and I would ask or defer to you to flesh that. What does that even mean?
so the Planning Enabling Act was amended last year to require communities when they're going through the master plan process to look at housing shortages in the community and then come up with strategies to address those shortages. So again, this is just a draft, and my colleagues at Beck and Rader, this was an option that a lot of communities are considering as a strategy to address their housing shortages. but it's not a good fit for every community. So, I saw that, I kept it in there just for discussion. But I don't know that it's a viable option. It was just something that I thought, I'll leave it in there and see what everybody thinks of the planning commission.
Okay,
But it came from a colleague of mine who's in Ann Arbor, and it's probably more of a thing in the Ann Arbor area than it is in northern Michigan.
okay. Because in that demographic information, it says that 32% of our houses are vacant. So.
But that's a misleading thing too, because they do the polling not during the summer season. So what might appear to be a big vacant might just be a second home,
Okay.
and at the time, the person's just not there because they would come up in the summers. So,
Because if you look at the numbers of
Yeah.
full-time.
Right.
so I don't know that, we can talk about that. I don't know that, my suggestion is up to the planning commission. I don't know that that's a good goal to put in.
Okay.
For the annual.
Enough. Okay, that's fine. Oh, I had no additional goals. When I did go to that January township meeting, and I heard, a number of people say, that were in support, or Alex happened to ask a question, raise your hand if you're here in support of zoning, and virtually everyone did. And I heard that the people that did speak said, maybe it needs some tweaking, but but keep it, but I didn't ever hear any suggestions on what they thought needed tweaking, and I wondered if anybody else got input on what they would want to see changed about our zoning. I mean, I didn't get any feedback personally, so I would just open that up to the floor. Have you heard anything about what they'd like to see tweaked about our zoning ordinance? I didn't hear anything first. I didn't hear anything specific. If you did, maybe perhaps you could put that in the plan.
Well,
In the priorities.
And that it's, the planning commission has always been working on the ordinance. We've been, this thing we talked about, we talked about tonight, and there were things we worked on last year. But, perhaps when we complete the master plan review, a goal for the planning commission would be to systematically go through each article and just, if there's a best practice or a need or a gray area that the zoning administrator mentioned, we can kind of systematically, as time goes through the ordinance and update it. That might be a goal to include. Begin a systematic review of the zoning ordinance.
We did do one survey with this. I wonder would it be beneficial to do a separate survey with some of those kind of questions more in mind, if that's a topic that the community is asking about.
Well, I think at least we have our bases covered, because if people really are passionate about that, then they would have an opportunity to let us know what would be a priority for them.
We would have to think about sort of what kind of questions.
Yeah.
To pull out that information.
They do, yeah.
But the master plan is, designed to reflect the needs and wants of the community, so that's something that here at the township board,
Yeah.
Might be a good time to ask more questions while we're reviewing the master plan.
Yeah.
But we really should be thinking about the master plan every time we're looking at the ordinances and making those decisions, so that's our base for the decision, right? That's our group.
Yeah. So I think excellent suggestions. How do we want to phrase that into consider,
Like a part two.
yeah, consider community input on amendments to the zoning ordinance or possible amendments or.
Remember, citizens have the opportunity anytime
That's
to
true.
come and seek for a zoning change. We went through that with the RV thing. And that's what gets it all going. So when somebody has a problem with part of the zoning, you don't have to change anything. They can come anytime they want. If they want to seek a zoning change, the mechanism is already there.
Okay.
So I wouldn't overburden yourself
All right, yeah, we don't need to create,
self-flagellation.
right.
Good point.
Yeah, but at the same time,
Well, nothing wrong with doing
Right,
that, I'm just saying that the mechanism is there right now. Nobody's denying that.
And I will say that, you know, Banks Township's ordinances, zoning ordinance is pretty up to date. It's more advanced than a lot of other communities, you know, we already have address solar, and accessory dwelling units, now RVs, I mean, short-term rentals, a lot of other communities, you know, they're just delving into these things, and it's already in the Banks Township ordinance.
I can let that go.
I don't think it's a bad idea.
Well, I-
But we can still, we'll be probably talking about this master plan review for a little bit.
Oh,
too,
yeah.
So, you know, if it's.
So with the-
develop Again, and maybe there's some more questions in general.
So with the addition that the chair suggested, is everyone else comfortable with, you know, maybe deleting the blanks and sending this to the township board?
Yeah, I have nothing further to add.
Make a motion for it, is that?
Yeah, just a motion to approve the 2024 annual report.
I'll make a motion to do that.
Support.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed, same sign. Right, so we will send through the annual report.
Yep, I'll make the corrections and changes and I'll send it to the board.
So we've already sort of started the last little bit of unfinished business, is just talking about the demographic community profile chapter for the master plan.
Right.
So I don't know if you want to walk us through it
It,
at all?
yes,
or-
thank you. And so this doesn't look, it's not in final format. This is just the raw data. So it's, you know, comes back to the planning commission in the final draft. And when it ultimately gets to the master plan, it's gonna have table numbers and page numbers, and there's gonna be pictures, and it's gonna look a lot more presentable. You know, this is just the raw data that essentially, you know, we looked at the current plan and we made the updates based on the more recent surveys and studies. So what I'm, you know, the data is kind of the data. What I'm really looking for the planning commission's feedback in is the narratives beginning on page 6. And then, as Patty already touched on, you know, starting on page 10 is that housing analysis that we're now required to do. Whereas, you know, under the master plan, we have to look at what the housing deficiencies are in Banks Township and come up with strategies to address. So, you know, nothing set in stone here. These are all just draft ideas, and so it's kind of a lot to go through too. So I'm just looking for some feedback.
I did have a quick question for you on the data, though.
Mhm.
A lot of times, I think this is related to Banks Township in particular, but there's a few that it says Antrim, and then some it doesn't say anything. So if it doesn't indicate, is it Antrim or is it Banks? Just maybe we want to make sure to clarify.
Okay, yeah. And I think the ones, unlike my mistake in the annual report, the reference to Antrim County is that table, yeah, you're right. We need to clarify that, you know, we're looking at Antrim County as a whole. And then there are also just specific Banks Township graphs. So I'll make sure to clarify that.
Okay.
Thank you. Lisa, let's see.
I have no edits to offer, Ken. I think it's a good summation of a good distillation of the information. And, yeah.
The reason too that I'll add is on page 7, we have kind of a disclaimer in there. And that's just the nature of these surveys when you're using that data on a smaller community like Banks Township or the village of Ellsworth. Sometimes the results, you know, are faulty, and we learned that with Ellsworth. We had, I don't remember what it was, I think it was their medium household income. The survey results were not reflective of the actual, you know, and I think the village did it door to door. And so I think that's not gonna be the case with Banks Township, but that's why we have that disclaimer in there, is that, you know, sometimes when you're dealing with smaller communities, the census data just doesn't break down correctly.
Mhm. And you have in there the sources, it's well sourced, so those are probably
how many, are not for the vacant and not full-time, 32.7%.
Yeah,
A lot.
it is.
Just more interesting information than I can, anything, but.
But following up to on that key takeaway on page 14, is that something we should pull out of that? I mean, it's a lofty goal and it might not be realistic.
And it's one of those really abstract, how do you flush that out?
Like, I don't know how you would do it.
Yeah.
The idea isn't a bad idea,
No,
because, I mean, if you can help.
maybe get a crack grant writer or something like that.
And it's not, just because it's not in the master plan, doesn't mean it's something the township can't do.
Mhm.
But I've learned the hard way, not here, but in other communities, if you put something in the master plan and you don't end up doing it,
Yeah.
sometimes it comes back to
Yeah,
bite you.
sure. So yeah, that would be just removing that one.
Okay.
You take new pictures, you know, we have old pictures.
We can, yeah, yep. And that's, that'll be discussions that we'll have at the planning commission, later once we get through the rough, do we want to use existing pictures? Do you want, us to go out and take new pictures? But I found that usually the communities have pictures.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of, yeah, it's just information. Good, interesting.
So what,
To do about it, I
yeah,
don't know.
yeah, it's the data, the data. So
Yeah.
what we'll do, is we don't need to do anything with this tonight, we'll just put this one to the side, and then the next month, I'll present another chapter, and we'll just keep going. Working through it.
So kind of as we just remind me of the process for this, so as we review some of the different parts of that master plan.
Right.
Then once we kind of all have some agreement on that, we will do some community involvement with.
Once we get through all the chapters, we'll come back as a final rough draft. And then once the planning commission, decides, okay, this is what we think is the rough draft of the updated master plan, we're required to have a public hearing. But we can also have an open house, we can get the word out other ways, we definitely will want to solicit, public feedback. Once we get public feedback, we're required to send it out for what's called a 63-day review. We send it to the county, we send it to all the surrounding communities, school districts, utility providers, give them an opportunity to comment. And then at the end of that period, it all comes back, and then we'll go before the township board. The township board will have the opportunity to have public feedback.
And do we have a timeline that we should try to accomplish this by, or is it really just the start?
The start is the important thing. As long as you started within that 5 year, you're compliant with the statute. We don't have to have it done by the end of that 5 years. So we're still ahead of the curve. We're good. I don't think it'll take 2 years, but even if it did, we wouldn't. be
Okay,
out of
so it's not like
compliance.
July, we
No.
need to have.
No.
Yeah, okay.
We're good.
All right. I have no new business. And we have a opportunity now for more public comments, if anybody would like to. Okay.
I want to talk again. Again, I just want to thank the board and your representative isn't here tonight for the report for the next township meeting. I would encourage all of you guys to come and express the same thing that you said tonight to the board and why you made that decision to uphold the existing ordinance. So, thank you.
I'd also like to thank the planning board for this evening. I think it's a wonderful thing that you've done. I'm also glad that the board has legal counsel to review the ordinances for legal compliance in alignment with state statutes. Zoning ordinances are not meant to be written at a grade school level. I'm not an attorney, but I was able to read through the 17 pages, found it very interesting, not hard. And I feel bad that Richard has repeatedly said he finds the zoning ordinances very hard to read and understand and doesn't understand the need for legal counsel. I think that's very worrisome to the entire township. But thank you again for this evening.
All right, well, thank you. The next meeting will be April 8th. And I will take a motion to adjourn. And second, we are adjourned at 6:49. That's a lot of information. 49.
You made the motion second to adjourn.
We have motion to adjourn, all in favor?
Aye.
It's nice to hear the word April.